we were talking about the bodhisattva motivation for doing the practicing to gain mental stability. And so here he's continuing on explaining this. So Nagarjuna says, furthermore, the bodhisattva practices generosity, observance of ethical discipline, and fortitude. That's what the bodhisattva practices. These three endeavors are known as the gateways to meritorious qualities. During the course of an incalculable number of lifetimes, the bodhisattva then becomes a heavenly king, a Shakra Devananda, that's a certain god, a wheel-turning sage king, the king of Jambudvipa. So this is just talking about how as bodhisattvas deepen their practice, they're able to manifest as leaders in the world, as beings with worldly power, and they do that in order to, be able to guide living beings. So the bodhisattva constantly makes gifts to beings of the 7 precious things. Those are 7 precious jewels, and so on. Clothing and the objects of the 5 desires. So the objects of the 5 desires, those are things that we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Yeah, because our 5 senses lead to desiring those objects. In the present life and in future lives, the bodhisattva ensures that they are all abundantly available. As it says in a scripture, the wheel-turning sage king teaches the 10 good deeds to the people. In the future, they are all reborn in the heavens. So this is talking about how a bodhisattva practices to benefit sentient beings, and so practices generosity, giving, so that beings have what they need, and then practices ethical conduct, here saying that they teach sentient beings the 10 virtuous actions, which are the opposite of the 10 non-virtues, which I think you all know. So that in that way, then beings are able to create the constructive karma to have good rebirths. In life after life, the bodhisattva works for the benefit of beings and causes them to experience happiness. This happiness, however, is impermanent, and so they come back yet again and are forced to undergo suffering. Because of this, the bodhisattva generates thoughts imbued with the great compassion and wishes them to benefit wishes then to benefit beings with the constant bliss of nirvana. This constant bliss of nirvana is born of actual wisdom. Actual wisdom is born of single-minded dhyana meditation. Okay? So he's talking about how the bodhisattva practices generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude. In that way creates a lot of merit and benefits sentient beings directly, and works to help sentient beings. Yeah, so the bodhisattva, helps to benefit sentient beings in temporal ways, giving them food, clothing, shelter, friends, these kinds of things. And yet this kind of happiness is transient, as we all know from our lives, our worldly happiness comes and it goes. It doesn't stay very long. And so seeing that, then the bodhisattva wants to give them a higher quality of happiness or bliss, which is that of nirvana, that which comes from gaining spiritual realizations. And that kind of happiness comes from having the wisdom that eradicates all the defilements and ignorance in the mind. And that kind of wisdom, to generate it, depends on having serenity, shamatha. And so thus the bodhisattva does that practice of concentration. Okay? So this is showing how it fits into the overall general bodhisattva practice and is an important element. then it gives an analogy. So this is analogous to a burning lantern. Although the lantern is capable of providing illumination, it cannot be useful in a stiff breeze. Yeah. However, if one places it in a closed room, its usefulness then becomes completely manifest. Wisdom in the context of a scattered mind is just like this. Although one may possess wisdom, without the still room of dhyana absorption, its usefulness is incomplete. If one gains dhyana absorption, then genuine wisdom comes forth. Okay, so the lantern may illuminate a lot of things, but if you put it outside on a windy day, it's not going to do much. If you put it inside in a room where there's no fan and nobody walking, then it can really illuminate a lot. And so it is that our understanding of emptiness, if it's in a mind that's very distracted, it can't do much to counteract our afflictions. But if it is in a mind that is very focused and concentrated and single-pointed, then that wisdom can really be very powerful in subduing the mental afflictions and causes of suffering. Okay? So it is on this account that even though the bodhisattva is apart from beings and far away in a quiet place, the bodhisattva is nonetheless striving to gain dhyana absorption. It is by virtue of purity in dhyana absorption that his wisdom becomes pure as well. This is analogous to an oil lamp. Because it is clean, its brightness is also immaculate. Because of this, one who wishes to gain pure wisdom cultivates this dhyana absorption. Okay, so in the same way, an oil lamp, if the oil is clean, and the lamp is clean, then it burns, the light is very bright and very pure. In the same way, if we meditate, on the nature of reality in a mind that is very subdued due to generating serenity, then it can be very bright. And so for this reason, somebody who seeks wisdom also seeks to develop the dhyana absorptions. Okay? So it's quite important in our practice. Yeah. Okay, then it continues. Furthermore, even when one is merely striving at worldly endeavors, close at hand, if he is unable to focus his mind, then such endeavors will not be successful. How much more would this be the case where one wishes to realize the extremely profound path of the Buddha while failing to avail himself of dhyana absorption? So even in our regular life, if you go to work, if you have no concentration, you can't work very well, do you? Can you? And just in our regular life, if our mind is constantly distracted, we can't stay on anything and accomplish anything, because the mind is always going, oh, let's go over here, let's go into here, So it's kind of like, we all have ADHD. We have, Buddhist kind of ADHD, because our minds are all over the place all the time. So even our lives, we can't accomplish very much, let alone when we, sit down to do something spiritually. Yeah? And so this is why trying to subdue the mind through developing concentration is important. Also, when you've developed serenity, the manifest afflictions are suppressed, And here, usually when we hear the word suppressed, we think like suppressing emotions, and that's very bad psychologically. Here, the word suppressed does not have a negative connotation like that. It simply means that the manifest afflictions, manifest attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, these kinds of things, because of the power of the concentration, these cannot manifest in a very gross way and take over our mind. So the mind becomes quite peaceful, and it's harder to ruffle it. It can still, of course, get ruffled because we don't have wisdom. But, on a basic level, the mind is just much more peaceful, and the afflictions don't arise so strongly. And then when you're actually in those meditative states, they can't, they don't arise at all. They're still there in the mind, but they don't arise. So, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah? To be able to, not have your anger and jealousy and self-criticism and all this kind of garbage manifest so much in the mind. I think it'd be great. Yeah. Okay, so developing concentration is one way to temporarily suppress it. It's wisdom that finally cuts it off. That's why concentration alone isn't sufficient to gain liberation. We need the wisdom realizing emptiness too. Okay, so some more similes. Dhyana absorption refers to the focusing of thought which has become chaotic. Become chaotic, how about is chaotic? Chaotic thoughts float lightly about even more readily than goose down. They gallop along and scatter ceaselessly, moving faster than a swift wind. Their uncontrollability and unstoppability are more extreme than that of monkeys. The suddenness of their momentary appearance and disappearance exceeds that of lightning bolts. True or not true? Yeah? Is this describing your mind? Yeah, with these thoughts just like coming out of nowhere. Have you ever noticed that? You're going along fine, and then some nutty thought comes out of completely nowhere. Okay, so it's like that. So it is the characteristic of thought to be unrestrictable and unstoppable like this. Here we're talking about, disturbing thoughts, useless kind of thoughts. If one does not wish to bring it under control, then, in the absence of dhyana, one will be unable to achieve absorption. Yeah. So if we don't subdue these thoughts, forget about concentration. And then there's a verse, some verses here that describe it. So dhyana is the treasury. Instead of dhyana, I'm just going to say concentration, okay? So concentration is the treasury for the retaining of wisdom and the field of merit for qualities which are worthy. Concentration serves as the waters which are pure. It is able to wash away the dust of the desires. Concentration is the armor made of vajras. It's able to ward off the arrows of afflictions. Although one has not yet reached nirvana without residue, in other words, one still has the appearance of true existence, a share in nirvana nonetheless has been attained, so you're approaching nirvana. If one succeeds in gaining the Vajra Samadhi, smashing then and shattering the mountain of the fetters, one attains the power of the 6 super-knowledges and is able to deliver a number of people beyond count. So the Vajra Samadhi is the last meditation stage of a bodhisattva before they attain full Buddhahood. Okay? So it, by having this, by having concentration, it leads us to gain that kind of samadhi. We have the 6 super knowledges, and then able to deliver beings beyond number is to be able to lead, countless beings to liberation and full awakening. Dust raised by tumult may obscure the sky and sun, yet a heavy rain may soak it all away. The winds of ideation and deliberation scatter the mind. Nonetheless, concentration is able to extinguish them. Okay, beautiful, huh? So those were the verses. Furthermore, concentration absorption is difficult to attain. Only if the practitioner single-mindedly and exclusively strives without stint will he attain it. Even the gods and spirits and rishis are sages, are unable to attain it. How much more the less lazy-minded ordinary fellows? How about the more lazy-minded ordinary fellows? Okay, so it's difficult to attain. You have to really put your effort into it. Like I was saying this morning, you need to really live in a quiet environment, having few distractions, do your practice, consistently on a daily basis, keep good ethical conduct, learn to be content and to have few desires so that you're easily satisfied. Because even if you go live someplace very remote, if your mind is just, writing shopping lists all day long for whoever is attending you on your retreat, you don't have any contentment. You're not easily satisfied, and that's just going to interfere with the meditation again and again. Okay, so that's why having some level of renunciation is really helpful for developing concentration. If we don't have renunciation of all of samsara, at least, some interest in overcoming the 8 worldly concerns. Yeah, because the 8 worldly concerns, I'll just go through them briefly, but these are the things that are at our present level act as some of the worst obstacles for us, cultivating concentration, because they're completely involved in the happiness of only this life. Okay, so as I say them, check in your mind if you have them. Okay, so delight when you have, when you receive money and possessions, and dejection when you don't receive them or when they get broken or go missing. Do you have those emotions? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. How about delight when you're praised and people give you approval, and being upset when they blame you and disapprove of what you're doing? You have that problem? Okay, the third pair. Okay, delight when you have a fantastic reputation among a big group of people and they're all talking about how great you are, and feeling dejection when you have a bad reputation and everybody's talking about, how rotten you are. Anybody have that? Okay. How about feeling totally delighted when you see beautiful things, hear the kind of music you like, smell nice odors, taste the food that you really like, and your body's very comfortable, and feeling upset when you see really awful stuff, hear awful sounds, like nails on a chalkboard, or people screaming, smell awful smells, taste disgusting stuff, and your body's quite uncomfortable. Anybody have that problem? Those two problems? Okay, so those four sets, those are the 8 worldly concerns. And they pretty much dominate our lives right now. And until we can get some kind of handle on them, it's very difficult to generate deep concentration because my mind is perpetually distracted by these. And our mind just chases after something, like this. Okay? So that's where the meditation on impermanence and death is very important, because it helps us set our priorities and start to overcome these 8 worldly concerns, so that our mind isn't constantly swept away by delight and attachment on one hand and dejection and upset on the other. Okay? Then there's a little story about Mara's daughters who interview the Buddha. Okay, so Mara is the manifestation, the anthropomorphosis of all of our afflictions. Okay, so Mara's daughters. When the Buddha was sitting in concentration beneath the Nagrota tree, the 3 daughters of the king of the Maras set forth a question in verse, saying, this is what the 3 daughters of Mara said, "Sitting alone amongst the forest trees, the 6-fold faculties," that's the 5 senses and the mental faculty, "the 6-fold faculties always still and quiet, it seems as if you've lost a precious jewel, yet are free of pain from suffering wrought by anguish. In all the world your visage has no peer, and yet you always sit with your eyes closed. The thought of each of us possess a doubt. What do you seek by dwelling in this place?" So Mara's daughters basically saying, your senses are subdued, your mind is subdued, but it seems like you've lost a precious jewel. You're not having any fun. You're just sitting there watching your belly button. It's Labor Day weekend, and what are you doing? You could be at the beach, you could be having some fun, but you're sitting here watching your belly button. And what are you going to tell all your friends at work on Tuesday when they start telling you about the fantastic experiences and the wonderful places they've been over Labor Day, and all you can say is nothing, because you kept silence the whole day. Yeah, and then your friends go, "What in the world are you doing? Come on, it's time to get over this already. Go get a life. Be like normal people already. Come on." Okay, so this is what Mara's daughter's saying to the Buddha. What do you seek by dwelling in this place? Are you nuts or something? Okay, so just like our friends and family. Anybody have that problem? Yeah? Do you try to tell your friends and relatives that you were coming on retreat over Labor Day? Yeah? What'd they say? Huh? What are you doing? Yeah? Okay, so then the Buddha responded in verses. Here's what the Buddha said. "As I have found the flavor of nirvana, I don't find pleasure dwelling in tainted love. Within, without, the thieves have been expelled. Your father, too, destroyed and sought retreat. I have discovered the flavor of sweet dew ambrosia. In peace and bliss, I sit within the forest. As for the beings immersed in fond affections, for all their sakes, I raise compassionate thoughts." Okay, so here's what you tell your friends and family. Okay. I have found the flavor of nirvana. Well, maybe not yet, but you're on the scent. You have some feeling that meditation and spiritual practice is going to bring you some deep-seated peace. So I don't find pleasure dwelling in tainted love. So Mara's daughters, I'm really not interested. Or Mara's sons, I'm not interested. Yeah, go flirt with somebody else, please. Within, without, the thieves, the afflictions have been expelled. Your father, Mara, has also been destroyed and has retreated. Okay, so I've discovered the flavor of sweet dew ambrosia. In peace and bliss, I sit within the forest. So you guys were all running around like chickens without your heads over Labor Day, trying so hard to have a good time, going to the movies, going out to eat, going to the beach, going whatever you like to do on a cruise here and there and the other thing, trying to be happy so badly. Were you really happy? Meanwhile, I was at Sravasti Abbey, blissed out. Well, almost. Well, I'm practicing. Well, I aspire. Okay, but you're going in that direction. And then as for the beings immersed in fond affections, for all of you guys at work who were trying so hard to be happy over Labor Day and still were dissatisfied, fighting with your family, being disappointed, for all your sake, I raise compassionate thoughts. Okay? So you're not putting yourself above them, but, you're clarifying your own motivation and what you're doing. Okay? At this time, the 3 daughters of Mara felt ashamed and said to themselves, "This person has transcended desire and cannot be moved." They then disappeared and showed themselves no more. So this is, it's like when you're meditating, it's like a story, but it actually represents what's going on in our mind. We're trying to meditate. Mara's daughters come, Mara's sons come, all the distractions and hindrances come. Yeah, but when we face them, with the antidotes and maintain our compassionate motivation, then eventually these kind of distractions get tired, they slink away and don't appear anymore. Okay. So now there's another question somebody asks. What skillful means does one implement in order to achieve concentration paramita, the paramita of meditative absorption? So how do you practice it? So now we're getting into the good stuff. I mean, not that the first part wasn't good, it was very good, but this is getting more into exactly how to develop concentration. So the response is, one renounces 5 classes of phenomena, the 5 sense objects. Okay? Eliminates five factors, the 5 hindrances, and adopts 5 practices. Okay, so you renounce the 5 desires. Yeah, so that is to have beautiful things to see, nice music and sounds, including ego-pleasing sounds, to hear, nice smells and taste, food, good tactile sensations. So we renounce those. And here renunciation doesn't mean like, oh, but I really want these things and I have to give them up. I'm so tormented from being separated from the suffering I long for. We often think of renunciation like being like that, like something where you're sacrificing and self-mortification and stuff. and you're just going to be like Milarepa and go eat nettles all the time. Yeah, not spicy curry. But that's not what renunciation means, okay? Renunciation isn't renouncing happiness. It's renouncing dukkha. Dukkha meaning unsatisfactory experiences, yeah, including suffering and all other unsatisfactory experiences and conditions. That's what we're renouncing. That's what we're saying we want to be free of. It's not like we're entering into self-torture and we can't have what we want. Yeah. Instead, what it means is that the mind is changing, and we realize that before we thought that happiness always came from outside of us, from the five sense pleasures. And now we're realizing that happiness comes from not craving the five sense pleasures, that happiness comes from being tranquil inside of ourselves, from not being so attached and driven. Okay? So, we usually think of our problems like we really want something. I really want this. Yeah? Whatever your version of chocolate is, I want this job. I want this promotion. I want this relationship. I want to go on this holiday. I want this acknowledgement. I want these sweet words. I want. And we all think that our suffering is not getting what we want. In actual fact, that's not the source of our suffering. Our suffering is that uncontrolled craving. Yeah, the mind that is obsessed with getting things outside of ourselves. Yeah, that obsessed craving mind that thinks I've got to have this. Somebody else has got to say this to me. I've got to have this kind of relationship. I need to be with this person. Yeah, I've got to attain this rank in my job. I've got to experience this kind of thing. I've got to live to see my grandchildren married, all these things that we tell ourselves, I've got to, I want so badly, that, we just crave. It's that craving that's the problem. As soon as we release the craving, the mind is peaceful. Then, if we get those things, it's nice. And if we also don't get them, it's also okay. So it means that our mind is free. Yeah? Can you get some sense of that? It's completely opposite from how we've been raised and how we've thought up until now. Yeah? Because we always think that I've got to get the external person or thing or situation or acknowledgement, And when we have that mind, then our mind is never peaceful. We're never satisfied. We're looking here, we're looking there, we want more, we want better, it's not good enough. Somebody else has more than we do. Yeah. So the mind is always tormented, no matter how much we get. Have you noticed that in your life? You get lots of stuff. Are you satisfied? No. Yeah? So the real freedom is when we give up this craving and when we say, what I have is enough, is good enough. So that was one of Lama Yeshe's slogans. He had these very pithy slogans. Good enough, dear. Yeah? Yeah, if we could train our mind in that. Good enough, dear. Calling yourself dear instead of good enough, you idiot. You know, good enough, dear. What I have is good enough. Who I am is good enough. I don't need to prove myself to anybody. I don't need to be what other people want me to be. I don't need to have the latest thing that other people have. I don't need to know all the movies and TV programs so that I can talk with people at work about them. You know, what I am is good enough. What I have is good enough. What I do is good enough. Yeah? And then there's contentment in the mind. And when there's contentment, then there's space also to improve. Yeah? But when there's no contentment and all we do is beat ourselves up, we can never improve because there's no space in the mind to think about anything constructive. Okay? So, we want to eliminate we want to renounce these 5 classes of phenomena, and we want to eliminate the 5 hindrances. Okay, so the 5 hindrances are sensual desire, okay, desire for the 5 senses, ill will or malice, yeah, so anger, sloth and dullness, or dullness and drowsiness, better to call it, dullness and drowsiness. Yeah? Okay. Sleepiness, you know, just that kind of stuff. Then restlessness and regret. So worry, anxiety, excitement, you know. And then remorse. I should have done that, but I didn't. I shouldn't have done that, but I did. You know? And then the 5th one is deluded doubt. Can I really become a Buddha? I don't know about this. Yeah, is concentration really possible? Or is this a bunch of hogwash? Can I really be compassionate? Scientists tell me I'm inherently selfish and want my own genes in the gene pool. Can I really be compassionate? Are you thinking all day about getting your own genes in the gene pool? Yeah. You know, I have trouble with that explanation of human nature. Yeah? I really don't think about my genes very much. And adopt the 5 practices. So the 5 practices, I'm not sure, but I think they're going to come here. Mm-hmm. I think they are the 5 dhyani factors. There's 5 factors that you develop in concentration. Coarse engagement, refined engagement, rapture, bliss, and one-pointedness. I think that's what it is, but he doesn't have a footnote here. Okay, so now it's going into renunciation of the 5 desires. So what is meant by renouncing the 5 phenomena? This means that one should condemn the 5 desires. Now, condemn the 5 desires, again, it doesn't mean that you hate external objects and you hate yourself for craving them, because that, that doesn't do much good. Okay. how pitiful beings are constantly afflicted by the 5 desires, and yet they continue to seek after them endlessly. So that's what condemn the 5 desires means. It means what a sad situation. People are running around looking for these 5, pleasures from the 5 senses, and, afflicted by that kind of craving and running around like that endlessly. And so they have no peace, no satisfaction, no joy. And how sad that is. And so for that reason, we renounce those 5 objects, in the sense of what we're really renouncing is the craving and obsession with them. It's kind of like, do you remember when you grew up, well, even maybe now, were you ever satisfied with the way you looked? Yeah? I was never satisfied. I looked at the people in the, the women in 17 magazine, and I didn't look like them. Yeah? What's wrong with my body? I don't look like them. They all have straight, blonde, long hair, and I have short, brown, curly hair. What suffering? When you're a teenager, that's, the epitome of suffering, isn't it? Yeah, when you don't look like you think you're supposed to look. Did anybody here look like you thought you were supposed to look? Was anybody here when you were a teenager? Turn around and look at each other. Was any of you satisfied with your body when you were a teenager? Are any of you satisfied with your body now? One person, good for you. Yeah. So, it just, if you think, how much time in your life have you spent being dissatisfied with your body, feeling uncomfortable because you're not as good looking as other people, or because you don't look like you're supposed to look? How much time have you, and anguish have you been through because of that? When you're a kid, when you're a grown-up, now I think kids have even more problems. They didn't have designer clothes when I was a kid. Did you have designer clothes?
I didn't, but other kids did.
I didn't.
Romaine bags and those little dresses with the tucks in the front that had a name. All these girls had, those were designer clothes.
Yeah, well, I guess I was really out of it. Did you know about designer clothes? How about you? Oh.
Definitely in the 70s.
That came in the 70s?
My rich cousins had designer clothes. We didn't.
Okay.
Designer clothes.
Really? I didn't.
A barracuda jacket when we were in 7th grade.
Yeah.
Or what was it? That black and white kind of, what was that called? Shark's tooth or something? Yeah, that kind of print. Huh? Yeah, that's it. Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so, each generation, and then you graduated from that into tie-dye T-shirts and jeans that you had to rip yourself. Now they come already ripped. But we had to, really work hard to wear our jeans out. You couldn't just actually rip them. That wasn't in. You had to wear them out and then get really cool colors to make patches to put on them that matched your tie-dye shirt. You remember that? Yeah, a few of you are my age. Now tie-dye's back in, isn't it? We should have saved all our clothes. Okay, but just think of how much time You felt like, I don't wear the same clothes as other kids. You know, I remember you saying, my mother made all my clothes. Oh, God, you know. They were all long and everybody else was wearing mini skirts and, you know, and then everybody had these kind of shoes. And, oh, I remember a pair of shoes I hated. I tried so hard to wear those out, deliberately scuffing them. So my mother would throw them away because I hated them. You know, how much time you spend on that, yeah? And then, you know, trying to get the right kind of jewelry that everybody else has, no? And then putting on makeup. Oh, God, do you remember that? You remember that? Putting on makeup? Oh, it goes like this. You know? And then having pimples. Yeah, do you remember having pimples? Yeah. And then you have to get all these creams and all these things. Yeah, because you know, your face looks like it's all red blotches, and you know, remember that? Oh, some of you don't seem to remember that. God, was it only me? Yes, I knew that all along. It was only me who had the bad complexion. Everybody else had the good complexion. Okay, so, I mean, just think, you know, if you remember when you were a kid and you look back at what you obsessed over as a teenager, I mean, you can really laugh about it now, can't you? Yeah, because if you don't laugh, you cry. Yeah, because we were crazy as teenagers, weren't we? You know, and what we want, what we thought was happiness, what we thought we needed. Yeah. Yeah. And now, do you think we're any better? Yeah. We crave different things, but are we any more satisfied with our body now than we were when we were teenagers? Now our body's getting old. Yeah. At least, you know, when you're a teenager, you still had your regular color hair. Now it's like, you know, where's the hair dye? You know, also the guys, too, you know. Guys, you know, you have to dye your sideburns. Although, until they say that you know, graying sideburns makes you look distinguished. But then you have to dye the rest of your hair. Okay. So, are you checking it out? Yeah. So all this kind of social pressure and how unhappy we are, and it's ridiculous, isn't it? You know, it's totally ridiculous. And yet, we get really hung up about it, you know? And so, you know, how we look, what our job title is, how much prestige we have, you know? Before, we used to worry about whether other kids got more allowance than we did. Yeah, remember getting allowance? Yeah, and the other kids got more? Now, instead of comparing an allowance, you compare salaries. Oh, except you can't really ask somebody directly, hey, how much did you get at the end of the month? That's not too polite. You know, when you were a kid, you could say, how much allowance do your parents give you? But as an adult, you can't say, how much do you make? So you find all sorts of ways of, you know, asking that question and fishing around to find out how much money somebody has and how much they're making. And then you compare it to what you make and you go, they're making more than I make. They have more status. They're more successful. People will look up to them more. You know, I'm just sitting here, same as when I was a kid. I don't have as much money as the other people. You're not laughing. Okay? But this is this kind of mental state. Yeah. I'm talking about when we were kids, because we basically have the same mental states over there, only they're a little bit more, they look better now, but they're the same stuff, you know. Same thing now, and like how much we suffer because of it, and how much time we waste, you know, being in anguish over this. Yeah? Kind of sad, don't you think? Yeah? Any of you have teenage kids? Okay, so they're in anguish, aren't they? Yeah? Always comparing themselves to others. Yeah? Okay. So, the faults inherent in pursuing desires. So there's 10 analogies. As for these 5 desires, one obtains them and they become more severe. So you get what you want, and then the craving actually increases. This is just as when one uses fire to cauterize an itch. Yeah, you have an itch, so you cauterize it. Then what happens? It hurts. And sometimes when it's healing, it itches even more. Pursuing the 5 desires is a useless endeavor comparable to a dog's gnawing away at a bone. You're not going to get any meat out of it. Pursuing the 5 desires increases disputation, just as when birds fight with each other over carrion. The 5 desires burn people in the same way as happens when carrying a torch into an opposing wind. Yikes! The 5 desires harm a person just as when one steps on a poisonous snake. So, you know, think about these analogies, but think in your own life, you know, when I'm chasing after the 5 sense objects, yeah, does it bring me happiness, or does it bring me, you know, a lot of suffering and pain in the end? The 5 desires are insubstantial, like something obtained in a dream. Satisfaction from the 5 desires is short-lived and is as if borrowed for only an instant. Worldly people deludedly lust for and attach to the 5 desires, not forsaking them even unto death. And that's true. People will die to get desirable objects, won't they? Yeah, we die to, people will battle each other to protect their honor. Isn't honor just good reputation, hearing nice, sweet words? Yeah, and people will kill other people and, you know, fight over it. Yeah? I mean, look at all the wars in the world. Some of them are ideological, but they eventually devolve into grasping land and resources. Yeah. And how many people have we fought with over, you know, material objects or over sweet sounds? You know, you don't say you love me as much as I deserve to hear I'm loved. Yeah. Okay, so, you know, we fight, I mean, people go to war over material objects. We fight about them until the death. Kind of ridiculous, isn't it? Don't you think? Yeah, fighting over material things, losing our life for honor, for material stuff, for fame and reputation. Useless. And yet people do it. So on account of doing this in latter lives, people undergo immeasurable suffering. So creating so much negative karma due to attachment to the objects of the 5 desires. This is analogous to a stupid person greedily attached to a type of fine fruit who climbs up the tree and feasts on them, but cannot bring himself to descend in time. Someone then chops down the tree, causing the tree to tilt over, whereupon he falls. His body and head are mangled, and he then dies an agonizing death. Yeah. It's a vivid analogy, but you know, when you think, okay, let's say that the top of the tree is the top of your career. Yeah, you climb up the tree, you feast on the delights at the top of your career. You can't bring yourself to descend in time to, finish with it and retire and be an ordinary person. You're sitting there, wanting more and more glory, more and more status, and so forth. And then someone comes along and chops down the tree, so your competitor develops something better. Yeah, your tree tilts over, your business collapses, and then where are you? Yeah, so you can take, these analogies sound kind of wild, but, if you make them from something into our life, they're quite real. Do you remember some years ago there was one very famous person in Germany who, I don't know what kind of car he made, but when the recession came about, he killed himself. Anybody? I remember hearing about that. Yeah? Just because he was so wealthy, making, I don't know if it was, if it was making Mercedes or Volvos or something, Volkswagens, I don't know, something, and the recession hit, and then it's like, I'm worthless, I'm useless. And he killed himself. Quite sad. Moreover, these 5 desires, when attained, when you get them, are blissful only for a moment. When lost, there is great suffering. You find the most fantastic relationship, and then person dies, you grow in different directions, who knows what. Okay? This is comparable to, this can apply to any of the 5 desires, money or fame or whatever. This is comparable to when a person licks away at a honey-smeared blade. Yeah? They say attachment to the objects of the, 5 desires is like honey on a razor blade that you're going to lick. Okay. In his greed for the sweetness, he is unaware of injuring his tongue. The rituals involved in pursuing the 5 desires are held in common with animals. Yeah. Think about it. Yeah. The turkeys. We have fantastic turkey teachings. Yeah. Really. I mean, you should see them in the springtime. They're out of their minds with desire for some turkey. And what they do, their rituals for courting, they're hilarious. Yeah. Huh? And they fight. Oh, they definitely fight. Yeah, the tom turkeys fight with each other. Then they all go out and they spread their feathers. They think they're peacocks or something. They think they're beautiful, so they spread their feathers. They're just turkeys. They strut around, with their feathers kind of out in the back like this. And all the girl turkeys totally ignore them. Just totally like, who are you guys that, calm down already, And so the girls just go off and eat. And and the boys are running after them with their feathers, in a raid, chasing the girls and pecking, fighting amongst each other. And isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And turkeys are amazing too, how they always want to be together. They have real difficulty being alone. Yeah, turkeys suffer tremendously from loneliness. They always have to be with other turkeys, and the bigger the group, the better, And so when they are separated from their group, yeah, they're in such pain, but they don't have too many smarts. So you can see our yard there, In the winter, we leave all the gates open. Yeah. So the turkeys go inside. Then part of the flock, are they a flock of turkeys? Part of the flock will come outside the fence. Then the rest who are inside, they want to be with the other turkeys so badly, but they can't figure out how to get out of the fence. Even though the gate is open, and they will run around the periphery of the fence up until where the gate is, not go out of the gate, but turn around and run back looking for a way out. Yeah, it's really, it's astonishing. But they won't go out the gate. Yeah, and they can easily, jump over the gate, fly over the gate. But, they'll run around and they'll cry out. Yeah. So one who is wise is well aware of this and thus is naturally able to distance themselves from the 5 desires. So, think deeply about this. Yeah? Okay. So questions? Comments? Yeah?
Just with the last thing that you were just talking about with the turkeys,
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about how much we like those turkeys because, as you talked about earlier, even though we never get the happiness that we're looking for from the 5 desires, we just keep, oh, it'll work this time, oh, it'll work this time. So I think we're just like those turkeys.
Yeah, we are, definitely. Running after all the things. I remember my very first Dharma course, my teacher said that we're just like animals. We help our friends and harm our enemies. And he said, like dogs, Dogs like their friends and greet you with a wagging tail and are happy. And then they bark at the people they don't like. And human beings are the same way. You do something nice, then we're like all over ourselves trying to be with that person. And then whoever we consider an enemy, we bark at them and we fight at them, In the same way dogs get into fights, human beings get into fights. So my teacher was saying that we really have to try and be better than animals. Yeah? And do something that's better than animals, something besides help our friends and harm our enemies. Use our human intelligence, to create some goodness, to benefit others. Yeah?
At the very beginning of this afternoon, you were talking about the bodhisattvas and their generosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't quite follow one part of it. I guess
Mhm.
that they'd want to give sentient beings worldly things.
Yeah.
It made it sound like it was so abundant that it would almost be detrimental.
It's the whole idea. Sometimes the way they explain generosity, it's you give away everything. It's kind of extreme examples. You give sentient beings everything they want, and then we go. But if you give a child everything they want, then they can't fit into society. They become a spoiled brat. You can only take these kind of stories and analogies so far. What this kind of thing is saying is from the side of the giver, there's no attachment. So it doesn't mean literally we have to give everything away, but it means to give without any attachment. And if we don't have attachment, then it's being generous is such a delightful thing. Okay? So it doesn't mean that you give up your wisdom when you're practicing generosity. Okay? But it's just an example of the non-attachment.
How I see it when I hear that is, I find it difficult to give care, love, attention to somebody that is being a brat.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to push it away. So for me, a bodhisattva, when he's giving to all those difficult people. That's
Yeah.
how I see it.
Yep, exactly.
The generosity of the bodhisattva. He's equanimous
Yeah.
towards everybody.
Yeah. He's not playing favorite, and he's not, forcing himself to give things to somebody who's obnoxious, but has a genuine, generous heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be listening to that person. It can be just be there. It can be also kicking him there on the butt if you need to. Whatever is needed.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Well, you mentioned at the beginning that one can't develop wisdom through concentration. Is that right? You said that through practicing developing concentration, you can't develop wisdom.
Yeah, just by having concentration, you can't develop wisdom. You also have to analyze.
Right, because I think the confusion I had was that I've seen some text that says that once one practices shamatha meditation,
Mhm.
calm abiding, that will eventually lead to vipassana meditation and clear seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not correct?
Well, Vipassana meditation is analytical meditation. Yeah? So the idea is, for non-Buddhists, it won't necessarily lead to insight or Vipassana meditation on the nature of reality. But for Buddhists, and this is the importance of having a proper motivation when you're doing the concentration meditation. So that when you generate that concentration, the force of your motivation is still in your mind, and your motivation is to get out of samsara. So then when you generate concentration, then you know immediately, okay, I've got to apply it to meditating on emptiness. Okay. Mm-hmm.
As a follow-up, is it only applied then, for wisdom? Wouldn't we also need it to develop, wouldn't we need concentration to develop compassion?
Yeah, definitely concentration is needed to develop compassion. You can develop some compassion without concentration, but to really imbue your mind with concentration and really transform the mind in order to get rid of the self-centered thought, you need very deep concentration also. Yeah.
Imbue that with compassion.
Yeah. You're meditating on compassion single-pointedly, then that acts as a very strong counterforce to the self-centered mind. If we meditate on compassion without much concentration, then it's like we're all over the place, aren't we? Hmm? Yeah, so concentration, you use it as a tool that you apply to all of the other meditations that you do along the path. And it enhances all of them. shamatha is actually serenity. That's how I'm translating it. Some people translate it as calm abiding. Yeah, but that's, I say serenity, that's shamatha. Okay, samadhi is the Sanskrit term for concentration.
Vipassana is meditative insight.
Yes, insight. Yeah, insight meditation.